Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to the second part of the 5 Spanish literature classics that I recommend you guys read. So in my last video, I talked about the importance of reading the classic, about the versions that I recommend you guys read, and I introduced 2 of these 5 books, Don Quixote and El Lazarillo de Tormes. If you haven't watched that video, go check that one out as well. So in this video, we're going to continue with our discussion of the rest of the books. So the first book that I recommend today is actually a play. It's called El Borrador de Sevilla, written by Tirso de Molina. If any of you guys live in Madrid, you probably know that there is a small plaza near Plaza Mayor, and it's called Plaza de Tirso de Molina. Okay, so back to the book. Maybe you are not familiar with the name of this book, El Borrador de Sevilla, but I bet you've heard the name Don Juan before, right? I mean, even in my last video, I mentioned this. So Don Juan is actually a legendary fictional character who devotes his life to seducing women as quite a pursuit. And that's why Don Juan has become a generic expression for playboy, lady killers, for womanizers. You got the gist. So next time if you hear somebody say Don Juan, you better stay away from him. So throughout the history, there's actually a dozen of works telling the story of Don Juan, and in different languages. In French, there's a play written by Molière, and in English, there's Lord Byron's epic poem, Don Juan, and then there's Mozart's opera called Don Giovanni, just to name a few. So the one that I've read and introduced today is the first ever written version of Don Juan's story. Its full name is El Borrador de Sevilla y Convidado de Piedra. So it's a play published around 1630. So what does borrador mean? As suggested in the English translation, borrador means trickster, somebody who tricks others. But why is Don Juan a trickster? That's because his MO, or the tricks that he uses to seduce the woman, is to disguise his appearance, to fake his identity and pretend he's somebody else. And now let's take a look at the second part of the title, Convidado de Piedra. So convidado means guest. Convidado de Piedra, stone guest. Who could possibly be a stone guest? If you're thinking statues, you're on the right track. So the stone guest or the statue is actually Don Gonzalo de Ulloa. He's the father of Doña Ana, one of the girls whom Don Juan seduces. And the reason why he's now a statue without flesh and bones is because Don Juan kills him when he attempts to defend his daughter. So in the last act of the play, Don Juan and his servant come across this Don Gonzalo's tomb in a church, and Don Juan invites him to dinner. I mean, that's fascinating. So the statue shows up on time to dine with Don Juan, and after dinner, the statue invites Don Juan to his place, to the church, to have dinner with him the next evening. Since Don Juan has no fear of this dead person, he accepts the invitation. And the next day, when he arrives at the church, after the dinner is served, Don Gonzalo says to Don Juan, "Give me your hand." Don Juan gives his hand to him. The statue drags Don Juan into the tomb, and as they go down, Don Gonzalo says to him, "You reap where you sow, and now God wants you to pay for your sin." And that's pretty much the message that this work wants to send. You gotta bear the consequences of your action. So the second work that I introduced today is called La Cerecina. This book is usually regarded as a novel, but as you can see, this entire book is written in dialogue. So sometimes it's also taken as a drama. It was published in 1499, right at the end of the 15th century. So it's widely considered to be the last work of the Spanish Middle Age and the first of the Spanish Renaissance, or the Spanish Golden Age. It was written by Fernando de Rojas, and as far as known, La Cerecina is his only work. So when he wrote this book, he was actually a law student in the University of Salamanca, and after graduating, he started to practice law, and there's no further literary work known to be written by him. So originally this book is called Tragicomedia de Caristo y Meribea, tragic comedy of Caristo and Meribea. So Caristo is a bachelor who falls madly in love with Meribea when he sees her for the first time in her garden in El Huerto. This Huerto is in Salamanca, and I actually went to take a look at it when I traveled to Salamanca last month. It's really pretty. It's got super nice view. So if you ever travel to Salamanca, I highly recommend you take a look at this garden. And as you guys can also see here by the gate, there is this statue of an old woman. This is the statue of Cerecina. So where does Cerecina, an old woman, come into play in this love story? So as I said just now, Caristo is madly in love with Meribea and is dying to see her again, but he doesn't know how to make it happen. His servant Semblonio tells Caristo that he knows a woman who knows the tricks that could help him, and apparently this woman is Cerecina, who is a bawd, owner of a brothel. Even though Caristo's other servant Barmero warns him that Cerecina is not somebody to be trusted, Caristo is very determined. And of course, when he turns to Celestina for help, Celestina agrees to help him because she wants the money. So long story short, Celestina does make Carrizo's dream come true and she gets her commission. But when Carrizo's two servants, Sempronio and Bartmino, show up in her house to get their share of the commission because they also help with this case, Celestina tries to trick them, which leads to her tragic death. And I will leave what happens in the end to Carrizo and Meribea to you guys to find out so that I don't spoil the whole story. So it is generally believed that the central theme of this work is love, and plus its tragic ending. Many people would compare this work with Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, but honestly, I think the story is fundamentally different, nor does it convey the same message as Romeo and Juliet. At least I don't think so. The theme that really gets to me is the theme of greed, avaricia. And in terms of language, since this whole work is written in dialogue, I think there are definitely lines that we can pick up from here and there. And there are sentences that in my opinion carry pure wisdom. For example, a quien dices tu secreto, le das tu libertad. You give your freedom to whom you tell your secrets. Isn't that wise? But in terms of plots, I do think it requires a bit more patience for you to read this book. I actually think this work was supposed to be a drama wordplay because there are a lot of dramatic lines like, ay, pobre de mí. Oh, por Dios, señora Meribea. Pretty dramatic, right? So when I read it, sometimes I got really tired of lines like this and I just wanted to get there, to cut to the chase. Tell me what happened, cuéntame, and then that's it. I just don't have the patience. So this is pretty much about this book. It's your call if you want to read it or not, but it's undeniably a very important work in Spanish literature. So the last work that we're going to discuss today is called Cantar de Mio Cid. It can be translated as the song or poem of the Cid. This is the oldest preserved Spanish epic poem. It's based on a true story of a Castilian hero whose name is Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. So Rodrigo Diaz is the original name of a Cid, and Vivar is where he was born, a little town near Burgos. That's why it's called Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. And why is he called El Cid? So El Cid is actually Arabic. It's a nickname that the Muslims gave him, and it basically means Señor. Is just a title to show respect. And now I know you might be wondering why a Spanish national hero earned such a title from the Muslims. And I will try to tell you guys a really simplified story of him because it's actually quite complicated. So his story takes place in the 11th century. He was born in the year 1043 and his father was a knight and a minor nobleman. He was actually brought up in the court of King Fernando the Great. He became good friend of one of the sons of King Fernando whose name is Sancho. And he actually spent his early years serving Sancho. And later the king divided his kingdom among his sons and daughters before he died. But Sancho attempted to reunite the kingdoms, and this means that he would have to wage wars to his brothers and sisters. But with the help of Rodrigo, Sancho defeated his brothers, particularly King Alfonso. So King Alfonso was captured and exiled to the south. But sadly, King Sancho, his friend, was assassinated years later, and so King Alfonso came back to the kingdom and took over the power. Despite his resentment towards Rodrigo, or El Cid, he knew the value of Rodrigo and he knew that he was a great warrior, so it's better to keep him by his side. So throughout Rodrigo's service for King Alfonso, he was exiled twice. So the first time was because Rodrigo attacked a castle held by the Moors without the king's permission. So he took his wife and kids and started to work as some sort of mercenary. He was soon hired by a Muslim king. Rodrigo worked for him and his son for about a decade, and it was during this period that he received his nickname El Cid, a title given by the Muslims. And one day, all of a sudden, he was summoned by King Alfonso because King Alfonso was attacked by another Muslim kingdom and he wanted the help of Rodrigo. So Rodrigo decided to go back and help King Alfonso. However, not long after he completed his job, he was backstabbed by his enemies at court, and King Alfonso was convinced that El Cid was a traitor, so he exiled him for the second time. So El Cid and his small army left King Alfonso, and after a series of battles, they took control of the city of Valencia, and Rodrigo actually ruled Valencia for about 5 years, and he continued to conquer a number of cities before his death in the year 1099. So this is a super simplified version of the story of El Cid. I left out a lot of names of people, the names of the kingdoms, and a lot lot of details, nor do I remember them, to be honest. Truth is, I don't actually recommend you guys read this epic poem. Personally, I recommend you guys read some, let's say, encyclopedia page online, or maybe watch some YouTube videos. I will leave 2 YouTube links in the description box. And the whole reason why I mentioned this epic poem Gandak Miseo is because of this historical figure, it's Sid. I think it's more important to learn the story of Sid or to know who he is at least than to read this epic poem. So I hope these 2 videos can give you some inspiration if you don't know what to read for summer. I would definitely recommend start with La Salida de Dormis. That one is quite enjoyable. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao!